The death of Elisa Lam. In late January 2013, a 21-year-old Canadian student checked into a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. 19 days later, her body was found in a place almost no guest would ever think to look. In between, a short piece of security footage would turn her disappearance into one of the most discussed cases of the decade and turn a quiet, struggling young woman into a character in other people's stories. This is the story of Elisa Lam. Elisa Lam was a student from Vancouver, British Columbia. In January 2013, she was 21 years old, traveling alone through California. She'd taken trains and buses down the coast, stopping in San Diego before making her way north toward Los Angeles. Photos she posted along the way showed an ordinary trip, a young woman sightseeing, killing time, documenting her travels the way most tourists do. On January 26, 2013, she checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, near Skid Row, a building that by then had already
rebranded itself as Stay on Main. The Cecil had a long history. Built in the 1920s, it had been linked over the decades to multiple deaths, and its reputation as one of the city's more troubled buildings predated Lam's stay by almost a century. She wasn't there because of that history. She was there because it was an affordable place to sleep in a city she was passing through on her way to Santa Cruz. She was booked into a shared room at first, the hostel-style arrangement common in budget hotels. But within a few days, hotel staff moved her into a private room after the guest she'd been sharing with complained about what the hotel's own paperwork later described as odd behavior. It's worth pausing here because this detail matters more than it might seem. Lam had a documented history of mental health struggles, and a police bulletin issued during the search for her noted she may have had depression. The full picture of what was happening to her in that hotel room, privately, internally, wouldn't become clear until much later. A few days before she vanished, Lam attended a live taping of a late-night talk show in Burbank, but was escorted out by security because of disruptive behavior. Around the same time, according to the hotel's own account, she'd begun leaving notes for the roommates she no longer shared a room with, notes that said things like, "Go home" and "Go away." She'd started locking her new room and requiring a password before letting anyone in. Something
was clearly wrong, but from a distance, from outside her own head, it would have been easy to miss just how wrong. Her parents, David and Elisa Lam, called her every day during the trip. It was routine, a daily check-in, the kind of thing that lets parents feel connected to a child traveling alone on the other side of a continent. Then, the calls stopped. The last confirmed sighting of Elisa Lam was on January 31st, 2013. She didn't check out of the hotel. There's no record of her doing so. All of her belongings, including her wallet and ID, were left behind in her room. She simply stopped appearing. For about a week, nothing happened publicly. Her parents reported her missing on February 8, more than a week after that last sighting. The Los Angeles Police Department opened an investigation, and detectives did what they could within the hotel. They searched her room. They brought in dogs to try to track her scent through the building, including up onto the roof. But the dogs found nothing.
As one sergeant later explained, the department couldn't search every single room in the hotel. They needed probable cause, some specific reason to believe a crime had occurred in a particular space. And at that point, they didn't have it. A week went by. Still nothing. On February 6th, the LAPD decided they needed more help and started distributing flyers with Lam's photo, both around the neighborhood and online. It got some local attention, but it was about to become something much bigger. On February 13th, 2 weeks after Lam was last seen, the LAPD released a piece of security footage. It had been recorded in one of the Cecil's elevators on January 31, the same day she disappeared.
The clip runs about 2.5 minutes, and once people saw it, they couldn't look away. In the footage, Lam is alone, wearing a red hoodie.
She presses what looks like every button on the panel. She steps fully out of the elevator and looks both directions down the hallway, almost as if checking whether someone is there. She steps back in. She retreats into the corner of the elevator and seems to hide. Then she steps out again and waves her hands in odd, exaggerated gestures. The doors never close on their own the way you'd expect, and at no point does anyone else appear in frame with her. There's no sound, no context, just a young woman behaving in a way that looks, to anyone watching, deeply unsettling. The video spread fast. Within days, it had been viewed by millions of people across the world, most of whom had never heard of Elisa Lam before that footage existed. And almost immediately, theories took over. Some viewers were convinced she was running from someone, that the elevator's strange behavior and her own pointed to a person just out of frame, manipulating the controls from outside or hiding somewhere on that floor. Others thought her movements looked less like fear of another person and more like a private, internal crisis, something happening entirely inside her own mind, with no other person involved at all. A smaller, louder corner of the internet went further still, weaving in the building's history of past deaths and turning the case into something closer to ghost story than missing persons report. Amateur investigators began combing through everything they could find: her social media, her writing, anyone who'd stayed at the Cecil around the same time. In the process, real people who had nothing to do with the case got pulled into the speculation and faced harassment for it. It's a part of this story that's easy to skip past, but it shouldn't be. The consequences of that footage going viral weren't contained to the case itself. Meanwhile, with the videos circulating and public attention finally on the case, the actual search continued. And on February 19th, 6 days after the footage was released, 19 days after Lam was last seen, it ended. A maintenance worker named Santiago Lopez had been getting complaints from guests about low water pressure and flooding. He went up to the roof to check the hotel's water tanks. There were 4 of them. When he reached the cisterns, he noticed one of the hatches was open. He climbed up to look inside. Elisa Lam's body was inside. The hotel's own water supply had been running through that tank the entire time. Guests had been showering, drinking, and brushing their teeth with water from a tank where Lam's body lay submerged for over 2 weeks without anyone realizing it. The discovery raised a question that, on its face, seemed almost impossible to answer simply. How does a 21-year-old woman end up inside a sealed water tank on a hotel roof? According to the hotel's own account of the building, getting to that tank required either using a locked, alarmed rooftop door or climbing one of the exterior fire escapes. From there, she would have had to climb onto the platform the tank sat on, scale a 10-foot ladder built into the side of the tank itself, and then lift a heavy lid to get inside. When she was found, she was naked, and her clothing was inside the tank with her.
None of that lines up easily with an accident. And for a long time, the LAPD didn't rule one out or in. Sergeant Rudy Lopez said at the time that detectives were treating it as a suspicious death, pending further investigation. An autopsy was carried out on February 21st, but it was inconclusive on the manner of death. It would take months for the coroner's office to reach a final conclusion. And when it came, the explanation didn't point to an intruder or a crime or anything in the building's past. The Los Angeles County coroner ultimately ruled Lam's death an accident, with bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing factor, after blood analysis showed she had not been taking the medication prescribed to manage her condition. Examiners found no evidence of physical trauma on her body. In other words, there was no killer in that elevator, hiding off camera. There was no other person manipulating the buttons. What the footage showed, according to the official findings, was a young woman in the grip of a serious psychiatric episode, alone, off her medication, in a city far from home, in a building she didn't know, behaving in ways that looked frightening to outside eyes precisely because something internal had gone badly wrong. It's a far less cinematic explanation than the internet wanted, and it's also, by the official record, what happened. That hasn't stopped the theories. Even now, well over a decade later, people debate how a woman in crisis could climb past an alarm door or up a 10-foot ladder undetected, carrying or removing her own clothing along the way. Those are fair questions, and the official ruling doesn't erase them. The exact circumstances that led to her death in that tank remain, by most honest accounts, not fully resolved, even if the broader cause has been determined. What's clearer is the human story underneath all of it. A young woman with a real documented struggle with her mental health, traveling alone, far from the people who checked in with her every single day, until for 19 days they couldn't. Elisa Lam's case became a viral mystery before it became a tragedy in most people's minds. The footage came first, the headlines came first, the theories came first. The reality, a young woman who needed help and who didn't get it in time, came last, and for a lot of the audience it never really arrived at all. In the years since, the case has been revisited in a documentary series and continues to be discussed and debated by true crime audiences around the world. She was 21, she was on her way to Santa Cruz, and the questions her death left behind say less, in the end, about a haunted building, and more about how easy it is to turn someone else's worst moment into entertainment long before anyone understands what actually happened to them.